You're listening to All Marine Radio on the All Warrior Radio Network. 10:38 on a Monday. We continue. That's on the West Coast. On the East Coast, it would be 1:38. In Sacramento, California, it's 10:38. Home of my cousin's husband, Joe Wagstaff, and Joe joins us right now on All Marine Radio. First of all, Joe, thanks for coming on.
Well, it's good to hear from you.
All right, let's talk about you. Born and raised where?
Sacramento,
California. Went to high school.
Native kid here.
Went to high school where?
El Camino High School. Eagles. There you go.
home of the El Camino.
Until the Falcons used to beat us up like you guys.
Exactly. We had a good football team. No, El Camino was good. Your dad in the Army, yeah?
Yeah, he was a World War II vet.
And
so are my 4 uncles. All 5 during World War II. 5 stars.
Wow, 5. My family has 3, and that's pretty rare, and 5 stars. That's incredible. But that wasn't.
I had 5 blue stars.
That wasn't uncommon though back in the day. Big families, and the boys all went off to serve.
Right. Came home too, thank God.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Where did your dad serve?
He served in the Pacific, so New Guinea, Philippines. So he was a dog face, so he was in the Army. He used to complain about the Marines stealing their stuff from Guadalcanal, came over, he used to steal their stuff.
That's what we did. We have a loose sense of private property institutionally, so we don't worry about it. And our response typically is, what? What? Oh, those trucks? No, those are wrong. You can tell they have our markings on them. Joe, you know what? Joe and I have had numerous discussions. And so, Joe, you become a police officer when?
1978.
1978, and you do that for how many years?
31.
31 years with the Sacramento Police Department. And what are you doing now?
I'm an investigator for the district attorney here in Sacramento.
Okay, so you're an investigator. How many years did you work with a dog?
Just shy of 10.
So worked 10 years with the dog. Now, Joe done police work for a long time, and we had a great conversation about. I was talking. He was asking me about the radio show, and I was talking about post-combat related mental health and things like that. And then police officers deal with PTSD all the time. Joe, any advice for any police officers that might be listening? You know, former Marines maybe that struggle with PTSD. You have any advice for them?
Yeah, you can't keep it in. You got to be able to find somebody to talk to. What the things you see and do in police work or combat are not normal for humans to see, and because you might feel bad is a normal feeling, and unfortunately we tend to judge ourselves for feeling bad, and you got to find somebody to share that with you who understands. That's what helped me. Do most police departments grade out high for addressing the mental health side of police work? Because I will tell you this, Joe used to tell me, hey, you should come be a cop. When you get out of the Marine Corps, come be a cop. And I said, no, you guys are jaded, man. When we go someplace, we know it's on, we go there, and then we come home. It's on for you guys every day, wherever you go. Right. And how do you get away? And I told them, the cops I know, man, they're pissed off dudes. Do most police departments grade high or low relative to the mental health side? I think it depends on where you're working. Most urban areas with a high crime rate inundate their officers in critical incidences, and that's a real broad term. And sometimes they might deal with multiple incidences in a shift, depending on where you work.
Right.
And what happens is you have to shake that off and keep going, and it just builds up. And you're right, they become jaded, angry, negative, and it's the human condition. It's very unusual not to be able to do that. And
over a 30-year period, and now it's plus 35 years plus, in order to see your pension for the new kid. It has a serious effect on you, and unfortunately, I think our society forgets that, and they, officers will say things, or you catch them in a conduct issue, and right away it's like, what is wrong with those guys? Well, right. There's a lot wrong with those guys, and unfortunately, folks, you did it to them. So,
no, that's, you know what I mean. I talk about our tribe all the time. Our tribe, a lot of anger, a lot of PTSD, a lot of TBI. We're pissed off. What's wrong with us? We fought, and police officers go out there and do that every day. But do you think most departments, are pretty concerned? Obviously, it gets on radar, and then things like suicide make it even more. Raise the bar or the silhouette even higher. So, doing good, doing not so good. What do you think?
Police suicide tends to cause agencies to really focus back on the PTSD or the health issues of their officers. But by and large, I've found that it becomes something that goes by the wayside over time. One of the things is managers have to be careful, because anytime they have a psychiatric issue different from the military, it becomes a workers' comp issue. It becomes an issue that as to the officer's conduct in court and or demeanor on the street. And so sometimes if you let that dog go back to sleep and not kick it, it's better for the organization. I'm speaking in my personal opinion. Right. Over my 30-year career. But I think it's gotten a lot better. When I first started, they used to tell you just buck up, which you did. You bucked up and handled the next one. Right. You never got seen showing emotion other than maybe anger while you were working, et cetera. So now people understand, if a guy's struggling, we tend to take care of one another, push each other up. It's unfortunately sometimes the management team, due to its political position and its long-term, I don't know, I guess the way they have to view their agency and their profession, the job, or they're taking the agency, they have to take more of a business approach to its employees. It's different than the military in that aspect, that it's a business first, and then policing second. So all kinds of civil decisions have to be made, and they try to protect the baby quite a bit. Sometimes that means either throwing an officer under the bus or ignoring the issues that come up. Sacramento PD tends to be extraordinarily good about taking care of its officers. I was involved while I was working there in its peer support program, and that's ultimately what most agencies are turning to, a peer support program, and those become a mainstay for officers' health.
What's interesting, Joe, is the vet centers around the country were peer support outreach places created post-Vietnam by Vietnam veterans. And when you walked in there, you normally saw, the guy with the ponytail and the beard, and his fatigue jacket, and he's a Vietnam veteran. And you walk, right. You'd walk in, and he'd look up and say, "Hey man, what's going on?" And you'd say nothing, but you were talking to another veteran, and that's why they caught on. It's not like that anymore. You walk in and it's staffed by civilians. And I think one of the things the VA has to do is get back to what you just said, peer-to-peer. Those outreach programs should be full of guys who are veterans who you walk in and you feel that, that camaraderie, that safeness that you feel around other police officers in your case. And then the other thing is that since I've started doing this, units now come back and they start Facebook pages and they get everybody to as many guys as they can to get on there, and they keep track of people, and when somebody's struggling, they have like national networks. It's like, all right, who do we know up near Sacramento? Who we know Wagstaff? Call Wagstaff and ask him if he'll drive to Lodi tonight because this guy's threatening to kill himself. And they're doing that. So that whole peer-to-peer thing is certainly, I think, catching on around the country. Let me switch gears. I want to talk to you about dogs.
Sure.
First of all, talk to us about the training that your dog has, and when you're looking for somebody, maybe a burglary suspect or any suspect at night, and I would think you were in general support of an area, so you hear a call and they might say, hey, we need a dog, or we need Wags to come over here with his dog. Talk to us, about the training of the dog and how the dog identifies friend or foe.
Okay, so let me back up a bit.
Sure.
The reason we're using dogs actually was started by the military, and I think specifically the Marines, the sentry dogs during World War II. And when they came back, a lot of these old vets became cops and knew what their dogs could do and started to implement that within police work around the nation. But unfortunately, through my time, the 70s and 80s and 90s, tactical situations where either a SWAT team would be utilized or without a dog, or it was not a SWAT team call and the dog was used. And a guy out of West Covina named Brad Smith designed a system called SKID. And he's an ex-SWAT guy, canine handler, and he basically came up with, it's a very simple idea. The dog is merely a tool, like an attic mirror, a special weapon, etc. And those, you don't use it all the time, just like the military wouldn't use a dog all the time. Right. But you use it for those incidences where you need to deploy your dog, specifically in a tactical situation, which we saw happen, I guess, Saturday night in Orlando. That would historically be just considered a tactical situation towards the end. But by and large, patrol service dogs are running the street all over our nation, responding to calls, crimes in progress, burglaries, drug searches, those kind of things. And that's the bread and butter of what the canines do. It's a very exclusive dog to have a SKID dog. There's a lot that goes into that.
How do they identify friend or foe? My guest this morning is my cousin Patty, her husband Joe, and I've known Joe forever, and he's a career 30-plus year police officer, continues to work as an investigator for the district attorney. Yes, did I get that right?
Yeah.
All right. And so we're talking about, in light of what happened, the tactical situation in Orlando, we're talking about the use of dogs. How does that dog identify friend or foe?
Well, the dog's using its senses. So primarily its nose, its eyes, and ears. So the dog has those uncanny senses. We've got to remember that dogs aren't humans and their whole environment is based differently than ours. And so you capture those specific things within the dog, and every dog has those senses, but not every dog is suitable for the kind of work that police work's done. So it's a real big selection process, a very in-depth selection process to find a suitable dog for law enforcement military work. It takes a dog with a lot of courage, that can project territory, etc., and has good lineage that shows that kind of work. Primarily German Shepherds, Malinois tend to be what I've always been involved in. I've put the Shepherd and Malinois both. And that's primarily what our agencies up here are using.
Okay. What about?
But they also use other dogs for other detection and or other than patrol service dogs.
Right. Anybody using Jack Russell Terriers?
No.
No? So Jack's safe?
No, you're Jack safe. I saw a beagle used at a airport one time by the Department of Agriculture.
Beagle?
Well, beagle. It was sniffing luggage.
Oh, man, that's been awesome. My guest, Joe Wagstaff, a dog handler. In a tactical situation like, and I don't know that if dogs were used or not. I know that in Iraq and Afghanistan, dogs were used more and more in special situations where we were going into compounds and we were going to have to breach a wall or breach of a compound to get in, or breach a wall of a house to get into because we couldn't go through the front door because we thought it might be booby trapped. And the first thing going through that was going to be the dog. Talk about the employment of a dog, and then just hypothetically in a situation like last night, Joe.
Well, the difference between military dogs and law enforcement dogs is the civil requirements and what have lawyers in our great 50 states have required law enforcement to use in the area of force. Because when a patrol service dog or a skids dog is deployed and against an offender or a member of the public, it becomes a civil rights issue because of the use of force. So if that dog bites you, that's a use of force, non-lethal use of force by a government agency, specifically law enforcement, against that individual, be it he's the target of what they were looking for or accidental family member, etc. So that's the big difference between military and police dogs, is the rules of engagement are a lot different.
Ours are pretty permissive.
Yeah, pretty broad. You know, if you bite grandma who's cooking inside the kitchen, maybe the military gives her some money, dusts her off, sends her on her way.
Right. We
end up getting sued, and next thing you know, you got all kinds of problems.
Okay, so a SWAT team in a situation like last night, if they had a dog, how would knowing that there are hostages in there, do you think they would employ it, or is that too much for the dog to deal with?
You're exactly correct. I think, frankly, in a hostage situation, it is very, very difficult for the dog to differentiate between offender and hostages. The dog, remember now we're asking the dog to make. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to get rid of this stupid call.
Okay. Our guest, Joe Wagstaff, my cousin's husband, trying to get rid of a stupid call.
I'm back.
All right.
So, the dog. You're asking the dog to make a decision, and frankly, it's a human decision that needs to be made. And the dog's using its senses to decide: does the guy with the gun who's standing there pointing it at somebody else versus somebody who's laying on the floor screaming and crying or bleeding going to be its target? So you're asking the dog to make that decision. So apparently you don't want to.
I thought dogs were capable of making that distinction. No. Maybe in the military.
No, not really. I mean, no, not Frank. Well, if you have an extraordinarily good dog that can make those kind of rationalized decisions, because dogs don't rationalize, it's based on training, and so that's how that is done. Remember, they're dogs; they're not humans, so they make very basic decisions, if that, and they're based on its senses. Smell, sight, hearing, and then their conditioned response, which is part of their training, is to bite its target, and its target is its prey. Basically, that we've taken that part of a dog that would be in the wild, or a wolf, and captured those specific traits and used them as a benefit for a tool as best in humanity now.
So the best application is point-to-point. I see him, dog sees him, I say go, and the dog takes off, and it unleashes that. The more things that you have between them that could be confusing or mitigate that point A to point, that point-to-point utilization of a weapon obviously then puts the dog in a position that they're going to have to decide. And what you're saying is that when you have too many of those factors, you probably don't employ the dog.
Yeah, I mean, those all have to come into play. My experience, being out as a dog handler, I left at the early 2000s. So SKIDS was coming into play around the late 90s, early 2000s. And so they were integrating specific dogs that were suitable and cross-training them with SWAT teams or tactical teams in order to deploy safely. Because, the tactical movements of a SWAT team or an entry team are very, very, they agitate the dog, and so because of the movements are herky-jerky, they're not just walking, they're very suspicious, and the dogs pick up on that. I mean, the dogs pick up on all the things in their environments that we take for granted. They're keen on a lot of those things. So in order to cross-train that dog, the dog needs to be aware that, somebody's going to maybe cross over and sit on the top of another guy, and they're going to be making furtive movements, et cetera, which might agitate the dog. You don't want that dog biting part of that entry team. And so they have to cross-train all the time. So the dog's accustomed to those movements and that behavior.
Hey, Joe, I got an email for you, and then I'll let you go. The email says this.
Okay.
Mac, you were talking earlier today with the gunner about post-Columbine lessons relative to law enforcement. I would be curious about your guest observation to the first responders getting organized and going into an active shooter situation like this. Could he explain how the police in Sacramento handled that situation? So, Joe, post-Columbine, there was, you're supposed to go do something.
Right.
So, talk to us about So, at 2:02, this guy starts shooting, and evidently there was a uniformed officer on the site who began to engage him.
Right.
But 50 people are killed. So, talk about what the first officers on the scene would do. If they were in Sacramento.
Well, I think, the unfortunate thing with something like this is because you have a nightclub, and that's a large nightclub as I understand it, you're going to have all these people pouring out as you're trying to get a contact team in there to address this guy and eliminate the threat. And unfortunately, other than maybe a gun, he's looking like everybody else in there. And we're not allowed to make mistakes. You don't get collateral damage in law enforcement. That's one reason. That's kind of what we're talking about, even with the canine. That's why the canine deployments are very, very prudent when they are used, because of the collateral damage and the issues that come up with that. So inherently in Sacramento, you get a contact team and you try to isolate that guy and then eliminate him. And it sounds like there was a gunfight right at the beginning.
Right. And
these things are crazy, crazy chaotic. So you want to contain them, isolate them, and then eliminate them. And I would think in an active nightclub like that, it's going to be a lot different than a school or a business during the day. It's going to be just crazy, and to have to be able to control that. And what happens is the confusion of all that causes, I think, things to slow down, and the cops become less effective, or law enforcement becomes very less effective at being able to wrestle the problem and control it, and control the events. The events start to control them.
Another email says, Matt, combine the number of people with probably what I would think would be dim lighting in a club. It sounds like it would be a very, very tough situation to go into. I sympathize with, I think, the thought that, hey, there's people being killed in there. Somebody's got to go in there. But at the same time, I also believe that it's a a very difficult situation to go into, what's it say? From being outside no matter who you are. So.
Yeah, I think the environment in that is a little bit different than a lot of the active shooters that we've seen happen. But you still have to adapt to it. You still have to act. And, the officer did engage him.
Right.
Probably sounds like he was probably outgunned. Most officers that work like a nightclub, off-duty type of job, they're working in uniform with their handgun.
Right.
They don't have their unit there. They probably drove themselves there, and they're wearing the uniform, got a portable radio. So,
bottom line, if that guy's got some kind of long rifle, semi-automatic type,
yeah.
you're ducking and running as he turns it on you, because of the capacity of the weapon relative to what you have. It's not like you're going to stand and trade rounds with him, right?
Right. You might for a little bit just so you either put his head down or get to a position of cover, but you're generally going to be using a semi-automatic handgun. That's what most of law enforcement nationwide is using now, and it's going to be you brought a handgun to a gunfight with a guy with a rifle. I mean, the odds are against you that you're going to persevere on that. He can reach out and touch you a lot better than you can touch him.
All right. Joe, first of all, thanks for doing this on short notice. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Have a good one.
All right.
You're doing great work.
I appreciate it. That is Joe Wagstaff, my cousin Patty's husband. No, Joe and I had a great conversation. His son is a police officer, just became one. Alex, my nephew. And so Joe, a lifelong police officer, loves police work, and has become an advocate for post-combat related mental health for police officers, because they get out and they get their combat on all the time. Okay. And also a reminder, John Dowd, free legal services for veterans that are dealing with VA and benefits issues. Just go to the website, go to show notes, and you'll see John Dowd links there. So if those are lists of law schools and law firms that are doing free legal work. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. We will see you tomorrow here on All Marine Radio.